Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics and Run. I'm Egberto Willis, your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We're going to have a great show for you today. Look, it's getting crazy out there, especially with this new, with trying to get the bills passed, trying to get the stimulus passed. It is crazy. But you know why it's crazy? Because of the way we cover it. It's all crazy because we don't specifically tell the realities of what's going to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get busy into the show right now because we have a complete show again with a whole lot of material to cover as well. So let's go ahead and get started. What is the title of the show today? Do I remember what is the title of the show today? The title of the show today is Doctor's Truth about COVID disparity. We have a doctor that's going to come on and talk about some of the issues with disparities, and it's not going to be necessarily what you think. Biden Latino Truth. Pelosi hits back, moneyless win. Activist Doctor Anand Bhat dispels some inaccuracies about COVID-19 disparities. Biden Latino African Americans slip really isn't. Pelosi hits back at host. A moneyless progressive wins. I think that's a typo right there. Anyhow. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi was interviewed on MSNBC by Kristen Merkel today. She had to firmly but graciously hit back at the host about blame in the current stimulus negotiations failure. Activist Doctor Anand Bhat did a deep dive into the COVID disparities and found a representative study that reveals some interesting facts. Joe Biden made a statement that is being taken as insensitive and racist, and Donald Trump is running with it, and our mainstream media has also brought it into the mainstream fold, something that I think we got to be careful we don't start doing again. The reality is he is more right than wrong. Tennessee's Marquita Bradshaw proves that money can be defeated in elections, and I love this particular story. So we'll take care of all of these right now. So why don't we just go ahead, and before we go into this, why don't we just go ahead and get busy? And how do we get busy here? We get busy by going to the first video of the day. Nancy Pelosi, we have our neoliberal differences, etc., but all in all together, I think we need to be careful and just make sure we do things right. So here is the deal, folks. Check this out, and then let's go ahead and take it on the other side. It behooves me why our hosts at MSNBC and many other stations have a tendency to really give Republicans a pass when it comes to talking about the stimulus, when it comes to talking about the negotiations, because the obstinate ones, the ones that care nothing about people, are generally the Republicans. I mean, just take a look at their bill. Their biggest concentration right now is the social discount on the Social Security taxes, and two, also they want to indemnify all corporations to ensure that if people get sick on the job and it's the fault of the corporation pays absolutely nothing. Well, Nancy Pelosi did a good job in this last MSNBC interview. I extracted a piece of it. Take a look at it, and we'll take it on the other side.
We passed the HEROES Act 12 weeks ago today. Since that time, 3.5 million people have been added to the list of those infected. 70,000 people have died since we passed our bill. The Republicans pushed the pause button. The president still ignores all the guidance from science. So we have to make a scientific decision to govern in a way that has the allocation of resources. We have to defeat the virus if we're going to open the economy and safely return our children to school.
Will you be meeting with White House negotiators today, Speaker Pelosi?
We are calling upon them to meet today. We haven't gotten a response back from them, but I always put things in terms of the children. For the children, we must come to an agreement. Children and families are preparing for school, and we have major disagreement between us on the schooling in terms of the dollar amount, but also how the money would be spent. The president is insisting that most of the money that they are allocating will go to schools that are opening actually, when the evidence is that across the country, school districts are saying overwhelmingly that they will be opening virtually or in a hybrid fashion, some actually. That can't happen unless you reduce the infection rate in those communities. So that's one big stumbling block. The other is honor our heroes is the purpose of our bill. Our healthcare providers, our first responders, our teachers, our sanitation, transportation, food workers, they're on the verge of being fired, 1.5 million already, because we have not adequately compensated them for their outlay for the coronavirus and the rest.
Speaker Pelosi, I understand that, and big picture, you did pass the HEROES Act 12 weeks ago. That is a package that's north of $3 trillion.
It is.
Republicans are saying they want something that's more pared back, but where's the middle ground, and do you have a responsibility to find it?
Well, the middle ground is not Sophie's choice. How many children will be fed? How we're going to deal with evictions and how many people will relegate it to eviction and homelessness. This is a different kind of a negotiation. This isn't just about dollars. It's about values. And our bill was very precise in terms of meeting those needs. Now, we can come down in terms of the length of time. For our food, for example, in the food, we have $67 billion for food and utilities and water. They have $250,000.
You've had hours of negotiation, Madam Speaker,
right.
And still no deal.
Well,
Did
we
you
don't have shared
overplay
values.
your hand and your leverage?
No, we didn't. No, we haven't overplayed our hand. We're not overplaying our hand when we are factually presenting what the needs are for our families, for our teachers, for our schools, for ending the virus. Now, if they want to say we want to do it with less money, let's find out where we can do that without undermining the purpose. This is life and death. This is lives of the American people, livelihood in terms of their economic success, and life of our democracy, where we have very serious differences. This isn't about bickering. This is very major differences as to science, the role of governance in all of this. I think that some of the policies the Republicans have put forth have been very disdainful. The stock market's doing fine. They don't mind if the Fed is shoring up the stock market and the credit markets and that. And we said, let's shore up America's working families.
Let's shore up Americans' working family. It drives me crazy when you have hosts make statements like, why don't you find the middle ground? The middle ground says, let's allow a certain percentage to die who did not have to die. Let's allow a certain percentage to be evicted who didn't need to be evicted. That's not a middle ground. That is slaughter. And that's why Nancy Pelosi said specifically, it's not about dollars solely. It's also about values. Do you value life or not? Do you value people or not? Do you value capital and corporations over people? In the Republican plans, that's what it's all about. The people are just slaves to the labor force. You go to work. If you get sick, we don't want to give you health care either, so you're on your own. If you get sick and you decide that, or you know that your company is the one that caused you to get sick, oh, but you can't sue us either. So we have to start putting the argument, the discussion, the discourse where it belongs. We have evil policies and we have policies that care about people. We cannot allow them to change the argument. We cannot talk about overplaying your hands. This isn't a game. This, as Nancy Pelosi squarely said, it's life or death. Life or death, economic success or economic failure. Let's get the right dialogue going, and we cannot allow hosts who are trying or attempting to be fair and balanced, but being balanced mean, well, instead of killing half the people or instead of killing some of the people, we'll kill most of the people. Let's get this thing right. As Nancy Pelosi said, it's not solely about dollars, it's also about values. It's also about values, and when we start putting it in those contexts, everything will work out perfecto it's important that we start to see those things, folks. Anyhow, next subject I want to talk about is there is this race in that for Senate in Tennessee, running against, I forgot the name of the senator, Republican senator in Tennessee. But anyhow, we've always been concerned about Citizens United and McCutcheon and all these rules that allow corporations to put as much money into elections as possible. And many times we feel defeated. Oh, we're not going to go and run in that election because there's just too much money in there and there's not a possibility that we could win. Well, if Lakeisha Bradshaw has anything to say about it, she'll tell you, hey, hold on, folks. Let me get her name right because I think I just kind of screwed up her name. Bradshaw is her last, Marquita Bradshaw. Marquita Bradshaw showed that it's not all about money. And let me tell you about the story. Let's go ahead and take a look at the story real quick before we move on here. Marquita said, the story is, despite being outraised 250 to 1 by her establishment-backed opponent, progressive environmentalist Marquita Bradshaw scored a stunning upset victory in Tennessee Democratic primary for an open U.S. Senate seat on Thursday after running on a platform that included Medicare for All and the Green New Deal. James Mackler, one of Bradshaw's four primary competitors, was endorsed by the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee and raised more than $2 million. Guess how much she raised, folks? $8,400. $8,400 is what she raised. He raised $2 million. What is great is, in as much as we want to get rid of McCutcheon, in as much as we want to get rid of Citizen United and all these corporate-centric money is speech and corporations or people type laws, the one thing that we need to do is always engage with that, not only data, but engage with telling people what we're going to do for them. I constantly say, if we can get our message out, we can get the votes. If we can get our message out, we will get the votes. The problem is we have a hard time getting our message out because the mainstream media would have been covering, just like they did in the Missouri race where Cory Bush won. She didn't get a lot of the media attention. The stalwart got all the attention. But she worked all the different systems, independent media and so forth. And by the way, that is the reason why independent media, whatever that independent media is, needs your support, because that is how we get to get the messages of those who are not funded by the plutocracy to get out there. Power to Marquita Bradshaw. Look at the tweet from Rose Movement. Her DSCC-backed opponent had raised $2.1 million. Bradshaw raised $8,400. That is wonderful. That is something we all ought to be very proud of, people. We ought to be very proud of that. Anyhow, continue. Let me welcome my people. Michael Rudnin, welcome aboard. AVQ, welcome aboard. OTCHCHC. You're messing me up with the letters in your call from YouTube, brother. You're messing me up. All right, Dimitri OG, ¿cómo estás, mi hermano? Muy bien estar aquí contigo también. Let's see. We also have Rose Williams. Rose is our copy editor. Thank you so kindly, Rose, for what you're doing for us. Carol Ann Richards. Welcome aboard from Olympia, Washington. And I think Rudnin is from Nueva York. Let's see. Who else am I missing here? Carol Ann Richards, Troy Astro from Detroit. And we have Mike Cisak. Brother Mike says, I don't know how to value life. Okay, Mike, whatever you say. Let's see who else is here. I got Troy Astro. MWOLF500 from Twitch. So we have Twitch, we have YouTube, and we have Facebook Live. Where are my Twitters? Okay, let's see. Michael Rudnin, I think I got you already. So anyhow, folks, let's go ahead now and continue the program. What I want to bring is Anand Bhat, and then after Anand Bhat, we'll continue with Joe Biden and the statement that he made that nobody really needs to hold it super against him. Yeah, a lot of people like say, "Oh, Joe Biden is very inarticulate." No, Joe Biden is Joe Biden. Joe Biden is a guy from the old guard, and all the things that come from the old guard is right there with him. And we knew that when we decided to stack the decks and pick Joe Biden. So that is what we got to live with. So now for progressives to go crazy when he makes certain statements makes no sense. I am the progressive then that's going to go ahead and say, okay, let me put it into the right context because there's some truth to what he is actually saying. But let's go ahead and listen to Anand Bhat, and then we'll move it to the other side. Welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm honored here to be with Anand Bhat, Doctor Anand Bhat. You guys know we've been talking a whole lot about COVID and all these, the different permutations thereof, etc. Well, I got a little piece of news from Anand. He sent me some figures, and I'm like, wow. Thank you for normalizing data for us, for our understanding. Anand Bhat, Dr. Bhat, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Well, look, it's great having you. I think this is probably your third time with Politics Done Right, which actually means that you really give fact-based information because that's all I allow to get to my folk.
Okay. Yes, I wanted to not be like the lying fake news, MSDNC, CNN, faux news network.
You're such a political animal too, aren't you? Anyway, let me tell you, you sent me a thing that I want to talk to you about. Right now, the theory is that most of the deaths are most of the people dying from COVID are Black and Latino. And one of the reasons that is, I think people like to just, whenever you see things like that, people like to throw it on culture and not look at the science behind it. But you came across an article that you kind of dissected. And what I want you to do for me is explain to folks what's really going on with the mortality of COVID.
Okay. Well, I was reading my favorite journal on the treadmill, the New England Journal of Medicine. You just like reading for the treadmill. Yes. And I came across one article. This is the sum total of my research on this topic in terms of mortality. And it was a study from Ochsner in New Orleans about mortality in COVID-19.
Now, what did you find?
So this article is very interesting because, as you know, New Orleans is one of the hardest hit cities originally. And this article, was there an between hospitalizations and deaths due to COVID-19 by race?
Now, I think right now the prevailing thought is that if you're Black or Latino and you're in the hospitals, you have a much higher risk of dying. How true is that?
That is, in terms of dying, that is not statistically true.
What is statistically true and why is it not statistically true?
Based on this study, so let's just go over the demographics of Louisiana and New Orleans. Louisiana is about 33% Black, same thing in the New Orleans area. This study was at the Ochsner clinic, which is an integrated healthcare system. The most similar in Texas would be Scott and White in Temple, and which means that they have clinics, they have offices, they have hospitals, and they have tertiary care. So it's a completely integrated thing. It's not separated. So this study was a chart review based on the EPIC EMR, which is what they use at Ochsner.
Before you go any further, explain that. Remember, not everybody that's listening to this show are doctors.
Yes. So this study was done by chart reviewing anybody admitted to the hospital with COVID-19.
Okay.
And so they didn't interview people. This was just reading all the charts.
In other words, this is data-driven, science-based. Science-based,
yes.
Okay, continue.
So what Egberto is trying to ask me is that there are obviously income differences between whites and Black in the United States of America.
Absolutely. We talk about that all the time.
Right. So what Egberto, Dr. Egberto Honorary is trying to ask me is the poverty explaining a lot of these differences and maybe occupation? Is that explaining a lot of this disparity we see?
And is it?
So first, when you look at a study, we look at a couple things. First, we look at what are the demographics of the patient population. So in Ochsner, they're seeing about 31% of the patients they see in general are Black, okay? And this is Black non-Hispanic. So Egberto, you don't qualify for the study. Okay?
Hey.
Yeah, sorry, you're out. And then they have white non-Hispanic whites is the other group, okay? So if we look at Louisiana and New Orleans versus the Ochsner Healthcare Network, we see that it matches in terms racially Louisiana and New Orleans. There's no difference, okay? Now, if we look at the insurances between whites and Blacks, we see, for example, that 5% of non-Hispanic whites are on Medicaid, which is the insurance program for poorer people.
Right.
And however, 15% of African Americans are on Medicaid.
15.
1-5. Okay. Now, interestingly, in Louisiana, which expanded Medicaid, unlike the great state of Texas, the uninsured rate between whites and Blacks is almost the same. It's 8.5% for whites and 9.1% for Blacks. So
really?
There's not much of a difference between whites and Blacks for uninsured rate in Louisiana.
Wow.
So that's a hint that healthcare access, even in a poor southern state like Louisiana,
right,
expanded Medicaid in Texas, could make a huge racial difference in terms of equity. Okay. Now they looked at high poverty neighborhoods. Louisiana is a poor state, regardless of race.
Right.
So they described a high poverty neighborhood as being 40%, 39.5%. Okay. So based on zip code analysis,
wow,
29% of whites lived in a high poverty neighborhood, and 56.9% of Blacks lived in a high poverty neighborhood. We're talking about 40%. That's almost triple the national average.
Right.
Okay. Another thing they looked at was comorbidities. The comorbidities were interesting. In terms of smoking, like lung disease from smoking, like COPD, there really wasn't much of a difference. And this makes a huge effect because in the Midwest,
groups.
So between the two groups, there's not much difference. There was 1.9% for COPD and 2.4% for the African Americans. Not much difference. However, if we look at diabetes, we have an 8-point difference, 10.9% for the whites and 18.5% for the Blacks. If we're talking about hypertension, we have pretty high, 23.9% for the whites, but 33% for the African Americans. Then in terms of coronary artery disease, this was interesting. 4.5% for the whites, but 3.8% for the Blacks. However, heart failure was higher for Blacks, which was 9.4% for African Americans, 4.6% for Caucasians. So then there was a few other things like medications. There weren't really differences in 3 medications. I'm not going to get into that. It's a little technical. Most people, both white or Black, were female in this sample, which is also interesting. You're talking about 62% of the African Americans and 54% for the whites. Now, in terms of symptoms, there were slightly worse symptoms for the African Americans. We have fever was higher, we have higher cough, and we have higher shortness of breath, which is a key prognostic figure. Now, then they looked at where, like the setting. Like I said it was an integrated health system, and this is important, Egberto, which means they have clinics, they have urgent cares, and they have a hospital, and they have ICUs. So unlike your neighborhood hospital, which maybe only have one of them, this has a continuum of healthcare. So they noticed that 21% of the whites in New Orleans were diagnosed in the office, at the primary care office, and 19% at the urgent care. However, for African Americans, there's only 13.7% for the primary care and 8.8% for the urgent care.
Let me stop you there. Hold right there. I need to ask a question about that, because the big question that always occurs there is, are minorities believe when they go to their primary care physician that something is really wrong with them?
Well, all minorities, I would say, have bad health-seeking behaviors.
Okay.
And if we go by COVID-19, we see that 65.3% of COVID-19 for African Americans was found in the ER. 65%. It was only 38% for the whites.
Why?
We don't know. But to me, it would suggest poor healthcare seeking behavior.
And okay, and I want to push back on that there. I have, and this is now, this is just sort of empirical, right? But I know a lot. I have friends who've gone to doctors, white and black, and generally speaking, they would have a tendency to say when they go, they feel they're not taken as seriously with the issues that they come to see the doctor for. Likewise, myself, I the first time I went to a physical, my doctor said, most of the times we don't find anything at physicals anyway. I don't even know why they do that. That's what my doctor told me. Now, ironically, I have a doctor now that is my primary care physician, an Indian guy, I must say, and I wrote him a commendation on Google because I said,
great.
That was the first doctor that has ever treated me like a human being, as somebody, as a black person going to see a doctor that wanted to make sure everything about my health. In other words, I went in there for high blood pressure. He looked at the totality of who I was. Never happened to me before in this country.
Did he go to medical school in this country or
he
in
went
another
to medical
country?
school in this country.
In this
and he's
country?
a young doctor as well. He's a bit older than you. He's probably 10, 15 years older than you.
Okay. Well, so I don't know if I can answer all of those, but the second one about health, physicals and yearly exams don't make a difference. There's a very large study that said that. That being true, I don't think I would ever tell a patient that.
Right.
I mean, it's less money for you. I mean, if they're paying for it, I mean, why would you tell them that there was a big study that showed that? Whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway,
and I don't even know if that
on
was
the
an
subject.
American study or British.
Back on the subject, you tend to believe that minorities in general don't like, and I would kind of have to fess up to that. I don't like doctors except my sister and this new doctor that I got over the last 2 years. And that's because the first one is my sister, and this guy treated me like a human being. That's the reason I go.
What's happened? You always have the tough questions, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I do. Okay. I have no evidence for this, so I would love to speak evidence-free for once.
Right.
There's been a serious decline in the art of medicine for 30 to 40 years in this country.
Okay.
And medicine, especially when you get out and pass your tests, is honestly more art than science. In terms of, it's not what you know, it's convincing the patient to do what you tell them to do.
Right.
Especially in primary care. Especially when you're talking about treating something like treating your hypertension will prevent you from having a stroke, prevent
Right.
you from having congestive heart failure, can prevent you from renal disease. So if I look at the American trained physicians who trained roughly before 1990 or 1980, they were trained in this humanistic, artistic thing of medicine. Foreign doctors, many countries, they still do this. In general, in the U.S., most medical schools, in my opinion, probably are not. It's coming back a little bit in the last 20 years. Like, I think my med school in Galveston was pretty good about it. But there was definitely a big fall off between roughly 1980 and 2000 where it was treat the patient like a robot, whatever, go out. I can tell you there's huge differences based on the year of training. That the generation before 1980 or 1990, they were the real Renaissance men of medicine, and you don't see that these days. And the Renaissance men of the baby boomer generation, which I have 100 complaints about the baby boomers, but in this regard, they were pretty good. And the people they're replacing American medical faculty with, I'm not so impressed with, to be honest. It includes my own age group too.
Well, I'm glad you kind of pointed something at you. Although I love your age group. I think you guys are doing very good work. Anyhow, let's get back to the darn document. So continue, please.
Okay, so now we're looking at two outcomes we care about, right? So we're going to look at what caused, in a statistically significant way, an increased chance of being admitted to the hospital or dying.
Okay.
Okay. So we're going to first start with being admitted to the hospital. Now, there was a, so hold on, let me make sure that I'm on the right page. Okay, so what they noticed in general was that 70 to 75% of the patients admitted to the hospital were Black in a state and city that's about 33% Black. Okay, so they did see that, so they did say that there was a higher, so they did something called, let's explain it. Let's look at cars and like biking. Let's pretend we're an insurance company. Okay. So Egberto, let's just say you were riding a bicycle down a hill. Would you say that's risky?
More risky than on the flats, yeah.
Would you say riding a bicycle down a hill without a helmet is more risky?
Yes.
Okay. Would you say riding a bicycle without a front brake would be more risky?
Yes.
Okay. And what about no front and no back?
Oh, crazy.
Okay. And what about if you're wearing a pink shirt?
Don't matter.
Doesn't matter. Okay. So those factors were additive. Independently, each one of those made riding the bicycle more risky. But the pink shirt didn't. But if everyone with the pink shirt is not wearing a helmet and has no brakes, then we will mistake the pink shirt for the actual problems of the bicycle and not wearing a helmet.
Right.
So this is what I mean by independent risk factors.
Right. We also have things like independent variables, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Well, you're already ahead of me. So they did say that there was an independent risk factor for being obese and getting admitted to the hospital for coronavirus. It was an independent risk to live in a high poverty neighborhood. That was a 40% poverty rate neighborhood. It was an independent risk to be a male. Okay. And it was an independent risk to be older. And it was an independent risk to be admitted if you were Black. Okay. Now, they then tried to analyze, did that affect your chance of dying? Okay. And I want to make sure I'm on the right page here. Okay. So in hospital death for coronavirus, they showed that there was an independent risk of being older. There was an independent risk of being having a high respiratory rate, and a few other lab findings that were related to inflammation. However, being African American was not an independent risk of dying from coronavirus.
That is so very important. And I hope people understand that, right? Because also that also gives more control to people's thought process. Because a lot of times you think, okay, well, because I am Black, there must be something inherent genetically that causes that, when the reality is the particular independent variables that you're talking about are pretty much things that we control, but they are things that we suffer from, as obesity. If Black people are more obese, I bet if they went ahead and calculated the white obesity with high blood pressure and diabetes, the mortality rate would then be similar, race not being dependent.
Let me confirm. They did it for both white and Black.
Right.
Yeah. And okay, here's another interesting statistic here. What was your outcome? Okay, so this study was done from March 1st to April 11th. So this is pretty early.
It was a whole month and change, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So if you were white, 4.1% were still in the hospital. 4.6% of Blacks were still in the hospital by April 11th. Did you get discharged from the hospital? 65% of whites were discharged from the hospital. 73% of Blacks were discharged from the hospital. 30.1% of whites died in the hospital. Only 21.6% of Blacks died in the hospital.
That is an interesting fact, isn't it?
Yes. So,
and I think that pretty much justifies what I stated. I think if you look at those numbers, I think it pretty much stays. I mean, yeah, more Black people go into the hospital, but as a percent, if you go ahead and take those remove that variable, it just correlate. Just humans who have these issues die.
Based on this, yes, 70 to 75% of those admitted. I think it even said 80% in the ICU were Black. However, if you're based on this study in New Orleans, more white people died in the hospital as a percent than black people.
Right.
By 9%.
Right.
21 versus 30%. So at least we could say, if you're admitted to the hospital and you are African American in New Orleans at Ochsner Health, you are not getting inferior treatment because you are not dying more. So if we saw something where all these people were admitted and the black people were dying more than the whites in the hospital setting, because we all know, like, the hospital does not control Medicaid. They don't control your insurance. They don't control your job. They don't control your poverty rate. If we saw that they were having worse outcomes in the hospital, I think you could make a case there's some serious racial issues within the hospital itself.
Believe it or not, I think for treating COVID, that's and I think that study is likely to be a damn good study based on what I read on it from what you sent me. I have a feeling it's a darn good study. And based on the parameters that they use, it was simply taking the pieces of paper, looking at all those numbers out there. I think it was a good study. And I think that is an important statement to make, because at least we know ICU treatment by those great nurses and doctors sitting in that ICU place, they're doing their job as they should, and that it is done within that particular unit very efficiently and well.
To me, my take homes are healthcare expansion, which we don't have in Texas, Medicaid expansion, which you do have in Louisiana, will show, first of all, your racial gap in insurance is very low. Okay. You're also seeing that you are at least going to the hospital. Okay. There is a study, it's in The Nation. I mean, I don't know the original study. Voter turnout increases when more people get on Medicaid.
I can imagine that, of course.
So in Kentucky and Louisiana, if you look at the governor's race in Louisiana last year, the turnout for a governor's race was quite high. And it's not during the midterm because it's on an odd numbered year.
Right.
And Kentucky as well, you saw very high turnout. And they have associated counties and parishes that had higher increase in Medicaid enrollment. You saw effectively a 20% increase in salary, effectively. And I think it was also 10 or 20% increase in voting. So this actually benefits your life. So I think that's a very good sign. However, I mean, but also to me, when I see this, if you, I mean, you ask me, ask you, or whatever, I think, to me personally, I think it's a good evidence that reducing poverty is, and getting people to see the doctor regularly, of course, in a culturally competent way, like you said. I think there's a lot of work we can do on the physician side. If we do that, that's going to reduce the disparities. Addressing poverty, addressing insurance, not having people being treated inferiorly because they don't have insurance, or they're on Medicaid, or they're on commercial to get better treatment. This is what's going to reduce it. There's going to be 20% that is non-economic racism, but I think something like roughly 75-80% is economic.
Right.
And if you look at, okay, well, why were these African Americans diagnosed in the ER? Well, they don't know why, but they did mention, for example, 40% of African Americans were working in service industry in the food preparation business in New Orleans, which is heavy on restaurants.
Which probably don't afford them insurance, yes.
No, not insurance, because they have insurance. Probably don't get time off. Probably don't
Actually,
get
yeah, you're correct, because they did, Louisiana did accept the Medicaid expansion when the Democratic governor got elected.
So maybe it's different. Maybe it's not having sick leave.
Right.
You know? There are other things we need to look at. There was a study, I haven't read it myself, but cities that had paid sick leave had lower influenza rates than cities that didn't within the United States.
Wow, that is impressive. Well, look, Anand, one of the reasons I said I wanted to have you here is I think this is an important matter, especially given that we're here surrounded by COVID now. You've answered quite a few questions. I really wanted to have you on to discuss that paper, because when I saw it, it was quite intriguing. Thank you so kindly for being here on Politics Done Right. Give me a closer.
Goodness, that's a tough one. I think we need to understand the economic roots of racial disparities. We have to treat them. We also must acknowledge that there are some things that are not economic, but ultimately economic justice is probably the most important form of racial justice.
Dr. Anand Bhat, thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
I'm glad to have you.
I'm Egberto Willies, host of Politics. Well, that was El Señor Anand Bhat, a friend of mine, doctor, activist, progressive, real good guy, doing a lot of important work in the movement. Anyhow, folks, continuing with the program. Beforehand, I want to say something real quick. And I think this comes from, let's see where this comes from. This comes from, let me run to Daily Kos real quick because I saw the story. And it's a cute little story, and I just want to kind of bring it out to you. It was, in Georgia, this young lady took a picture of the classroom that showed I thought they actually put the picture in the article, but they didn't. But it showed that in Georgia, the kids didn't have masks on, they weren't socially distancing, they're all tight-knit. And the school had the nerve to suspend her under the rule. Please see the student handbook for dress code information available at the school. Any student who is not within dress code will have a parent call and record a new. I don't know why they printed that. But anyhow, she took a picture. But what was fun of it, and it made national news, it went viral. She went on the news and she said the following. Hannah Waters is one of the suspended teens. In an interview with CNN legal correspondent Lauren Coates, Waters said she had no regrets about posting the photo, even though they suspended her for 5 days. In a tribute to the legendary congressman and civil rights hero John Lewis, she said it was good and necessary trouble. Lewis, who we will consider in the future one of our founding fathers, John Lewis, for making America a better America, he said, sometimes you have to get into good trouble. And that is what she did. Let's give her kudos for doing what she needed to do. Anyhow, here's an interesting thing, folks. Here's an interesting thing. The next subject that we're covering is El Señor Biden. I want you to listen to this, and then let's go ahead and take it on the other side. Let's see if I can grow her first and see. I don't know how big that's. That's not what I want to do. That's not what I wanted to do. That's not what I want to do. Let's just go ahead and do it this way here. Play it for you. If it'll play. Come on, Biden, talk to me. All right, let's do it again.
A few questions that I'd just like to get through because they are incredibly important to the Latino community. First of all, you are extending TPS, temporary protected status, to Venezuelans. Cubans, though, are now being deported in unprecedented numbers. Would you stop those deportations?
What I said, I'm going to look at entire temporary. I'm going to look at every single country in the world that, in fact, is being, and this guy's sending them back. The reason why I came up with Venezuela is he's not even allowing it to exist in the first place. And so the TPS program is something I will move on the first day I'm in office to make sure that we extend it to people. We look for too long, we didn't get it right. But here's the deal. I think that we should be extending it. Anybody can prove that they are in jeopardy to go back to their country, and the reason they came in the first place, they should be able to stay in the United States of America until the circumstance changes in their country. And that's why, by the way, I put that program together to provide. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. Are you going to re-engage with Cuba, though? I mean, I'm specifically wondering about, the Florida communities that are, incredibly interested in the Cuba issue and see status given to Venezuelans while Cubans are being deported.
The answer is yes. I'm going to engage. Yes. And by the way, what you all know, but most people don't know, unlike the African-American community, with notable exceptions, the Latino community is an incredibly diverse community with incredibly different attitudes about different things. You go to Florida, you find a very different attitude about immigration in certain places than you do when you're in Arizona. So it's a very diverse community.
Now, they are trying to make that statement by Biden a racist statement or a statement somehow that he's saying that the African-American community is an homogeneous community. First of all, if he had said black is, all black people are the same or something like that, I'll get it. But what he was saying is that African Americans are African Americans. They are people that are descendants of slaves in America, and they share a common interest. When you talk about Latinos, you're talking about Spanish-speaking people from Mexico, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, Honduras, and all these other places. They do not share the same sort of homogeneity that you have with African Americans. And you know, let me shock folks a little bit. There's a movement called the ADOS movement, African Descendants of Slaves. Okay, that's a movement in the United States, and you know I support the movement. And one of my good friends said, "Yes, Egberto, you can be an ally, but remember, you're not ADOS. In other words, you're not one of us. You're not African American. You are You're Afro-Latino, Afro-Caribbean. I'm both Afro-Caribbean and Afro-Latino, but I'm not African American." So, I mean, it's all these distinctions that this country made to categorize people that create a certain kind of division. And when El Señor Biden says that, people go, "Oh, you can't really say that." I'm sorry. He's right. He is right. African Americans share a particular lineage that is completely different from Latinos who share different lineages completely. African Americans have in general one lineage, and that is when they came here as slaves, or the ones that, you know, free people are the ones up north or whatever. But Latinos, if you bring a Latino from Mexico and a Latino from Argentina, there is a complete difference. In fact, Latinos from Argentina have a tendency to be more European, and in fact, a lot of them have German descent that kind of, well, we won't go into that other factor that comes into the separation between the Chileans and the Argentinians versus the Latinos that are on the Caribbean coast, etc. There's a huge difference in Latinos altogether. Even between Mexican Latinos and Cuban Latinos. Very, very different. So, so while I think Donald Trump showed an ignorance when he wanted to blow up what Biden had to say, but worse is when the media took it on, the first thing the media should have said is, guess what? The vice president, what he was stating was actually true. He wasn't stating that all African Americans have the same values or are the same. He was talking about lineage, and based on the previous, what they were talking about, why would you treat a Venezuelan different than you would treat a Cuba versus a Mexican versus, these different countries? These people are all Latinos, but they're all Latinos because America, in its identification of people, decided to call them Latinos in one big pail. But they're all different. Okay, Daniel Ledos. Okay, it's time for me to start tackling these statements. And of course, Daniel Ledo would have something to say here. And Brother Ledo says, nope, what Joe Biden is saying is that African Americans are too stupid to have independent thought and they will all think alike. Wrong. That's not what they were talking about. Again, now you think about what you were saying compared to what I just played. They were playing a statement as to why different treatments to different Latinos, and he brought the African American in to show different minority sets. When you talk about the African American minority set, you can talk about certain kind of a congruousness. When you talk about the others, it's different. So it's very important for people to understand the reality. Okay, let's see. And by the way, Biden is not Rodnin. Biden is neither your man nor my man. But the truth of the matter is, and I'm telling all my brothers that are progressives or whatever, right now we, in my humble opinion, should be voting all Democratic to make an important change. And when we get this through, we then make the progressive necessary change. But we have to start where we have to deal with the cards that we currently have and continuously get better. And how do I know we can get better? Cori Bush, Marquita Bradshaw. We can do it. We have not done it yet. We are getting there. We are growing. The progressive movement is getting traction. The idea that Black Lives Matter is now more positive than the movement was before, that it's over 50%, says that we are getting through. So let's remember this, brothers and sisters. Right now, I'm going to tell my followers, the people who have any faith in what I have to say, is if this Bernie Sanders supporter is going to vote for Biden, I think all of us can, and I state that categorically. Thank you for bringing up Jamal Bowman from New York as well. Very good point. Very good point. Okay, let me continue. Amen, Paul. Oh, I don't think I welcome Paul Fleming. Paul Fleming, welcome aboard. Rose Williams, I think I welcomed you already. Bruce Pollard, I don't think I welcomed you. Daniel Ledo, I don't think I welcomed you either, so welcome aboard, my friend. Who else did I miss? I think I saw some others in there that I didn't quite call out. If I missed you, just send me another mail. Oh, Norman Reynolds, my brother, welcome aboard. And who else is here that I didn't call out? Carol Ann Richards, I think I called you out. Okay, I'm going to go to the top now and start seeing if there's anything that I need to take care of immediately. Bear with me, folks. We're really killing it on... Rudnin says, Egberto, don't ask me to vote for Biden. I'm going third party. If Biden on the Democratic ticket, he's going to win my state, New York, regardless of my vote. Well, Rudnin, you are making a calculated choice based on a very intelligent context. You're doing both a protest vote as well as a vote that says... you know that it won't matter. So I'm not going to sit down and argue with you, Brother Rudnin, because I think I understand what you're doing. Bruce, fully agree. It's a binary choice. Okay, let's see what else is here. Increments beats decrement any day. Absolutely so. Though I'm not an incrementalist, Bruce, but there are times that you're forced to be incrementalist, and that is what I intend to do for this particular election. Let's see who else is here. Michael Rudnin. CSEC, every time you type, you say the opposite of the truth. There's a reason I blocked you, troll. No, Michael. Well, I can't tell you what to do, but you engage, Brother CSEC. Engage, Brother CSEC. Brother CSEC is with us every day. Brother CSEC is searching for truth as well. Let's encourage others to search for the truth. Okay, CSEC, getting over the virus requires a vaccine. We won't have one until next year. Meantime, we need to do what we can to keep citizens safe. Michael Rudnin, very smart statement. Rose says, Mike making pronouncements like that doesn't foster any kind of dialogue, just more divisiveness. Democrats aren't claiming. Well, let me tell you what's going on, Rose. If you take a look at right-wing media tells their people. Unlike left-wing media, we don't tell people that right-wing people are stupid, bad, or, well, some do, but we don't go ahead and come out as a policy and say, these people are bad. And by the way, I'm going to put a phone number on in case somebody wants to call in real quickly. I probably can take a minute call or something. We don't say things like, these people are bad. We try to be all-encompassing and bringing them into the fold. They're scared of us. They think that somehow we have horns. And they've made a good narrative on their networks to promote that lie. That is why I, as a representative of progressives, I try to keep that door open so that they know that I'm not going to return their favor in kind. And that's the reason I take the stance that I take. It's not that I'm a sucker or that I want to, that I'm on my knees begging people to come along. It's because I understand what's framing their method of thinking. That's the reason why. Okay, let's see what else do I always state in differences in medical care by race rather than by location. I believe that the second largest cause of difference in outcomes is environmental. Very true. Look at pollution and just take a look at Cancer Alley in Houston. That is probative to what you've just said there, Rudnin. Okay, let's see. I think I saw some new messages come in. Let me go to the bottom. Rose says, indefinitely blue states voting alternate party can make it possible for them to gain a foothold in the future. Yes, very true. And Rose, less than 10% of the population has any serious health issues. That would be a problem with COVID-19 for people who ages 1 through 60. Now, let me just say one thing about COVID-19, folks, and that is COVID-19 is not just a lung issue or affects the lungs. It's systemic. What that means is different people get affected differently. So as a relative of mine got kidney damage, lung damage, and brain damage, brain clot in the brain. Okay, and it's going to be a while for a absolutely full recovery. And kids have certain kinds of things that in the way it hits them as well. So this disease is a nasty disease. It's not just a cold or anything like that. It's a lot deeper than that. So we need to kind of make sure and remember that as we are promoting and as we are telling people about this issue. Okay, it's time for me to ask you guys to please become supporters of Politics Done Right. To do so, it's not very difficult at all. Actually, it's very easy. Please go to politicsdoneright.com/Patreon to become a subscriber. It's very, 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 very inexpensive to become a subscriber, and you're helping to make sure I can keep this program on air. You can also go to PayPal. That is politicsdoneright.com/PayPal. Again, that is politicsdoneright.com/PayPal. If you go to politicsdoneright.paypal, it takes you to our special screen as well. Facebook has allowed us to start taking memberships on Facebook, so you can go to politicsdoneright.com/Facebook. And if you come to our store and buy a T-shirt or buy a cup or whatever, here's our cup. One of our cups, politicsdoneright.com. We also have cups that say I support independent media. We have T-shirts that say that. And if you doubt about the T-shirt that says that, look at one of our guests. Oh, I don't have it queued up. I should have had it queued up. Anyway, just go ahead and get one of our T-shirts as well. Politics Done Right. We have it that has a Politics Done Right logo. We also have them that says we support independent media. We have some with the squad on it, the whole works. So please go ahead and support us. We do need your support. And our equipment fund, when all of this is over and we're back on the road, we're going to need to get some new equipment. You can always join our GoFundMe, which is politicsdoneright.com/GoFundMe. But right now what we need is a lot of subscribers. So please go to politicsdoneright.com/Patreon, politicsdoneright.com/Patreon. Folks, I know you have places that you can go anytime. Those of you that are always here, I thank you so kindly. Both my libertarians, my conservatives, my progressives, my liberals, my Democrats, my Republicans. I love you all. I like the dialogue. I would like sometime for us to start doing this under, sometimes maybe under Zoom, where we have faces and we can have some good positive fights. Notice I said positive fights, where we can all come together and talk, because that's what I'm all about. I want to see CSEC in there. I want to see Rose in there. I want to see everybody in there just sitting down and having a chat face-to-face. Sometimes when you chat face-to-face, you can see within the intonation of people, within the characterizations of people, exactly what they're saying. So, folks, thank you so kindly for being here. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right, and you know how I end this, baby. I am what? Out! I'm Egberto Willies, host of Politics Done Right, an independent news program. I post several news videos of interest every day. I ask you so kindly to subscribe to my channel, and please leave me some comments. Thank you very much.